very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Crapo.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and Dr. Chu, I also welcome you here. Before I get started on my questions, I just wanted to mention my disappointment, and I'm sure you share it, over the incident that we were notified about last week concerning the loss of personal information of about 59,000 current and former employees at the Idaho National Laboratory. I know and I hope that your department will continue to follow up on efforts to protect the credit histories of those individuals and encourage you to do everything you can to make certain that we protect against this type of incident in the future. I want to come back to nuclear, as you may have suspected. I strongly support the comments that have been made by my colleague, Senator Gregg, and by my colleague, Senator Murray, with regard to both the environmental management side of the issue as well as the advanced movement forward on nuclear power. I know you've already indicated your support for nuclear power. I wanted to point out that, as you're very well aware, in August of 2008, when you were the director of the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory, you, along with the other directors of our national labs, signed a report called A Sustainable Energy Future, the Essential Role of Nuclear Energy. And, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to submit a copy of that report for the record.
Without objection.
Thank you. And the reason I wanted to do that is simply to make sure that the record shows the strong support that exists for nuclear power as a key part of our national energy policy. Senator Gregg has talked about the need to focus on making sure that nuclear power is treated properly in the budget and that we focus on the loan guarantees and the licensing. That report also laid out a very aggressive nuclear R&D agenda need that covers both sustaining the current reactor fleet, closing the nuclear fuel cycle, and expanding our nuclear power's reach beyond electricity. My question to you is, these R&D activities require much significant funding. I think they'll have a tremendous return on investment. But are you and the administration committed to properly funding these R&D activities?
The simple answer is yes. I stand by what I signed several years ago. As I said, I have a record of saying that nuclear has to be part of our energy mix in this century. I think closing the fuel cycle is something we do want to do. We do not know how to do it in its present form. I'm worried about its proliferation potential, and we should work hard at closing the fuel cycle to make it more proliferation resistant. But in the long term, I think ideally it would be a good step for several reasons. It has the potential for greatly reducing the amount of nuclear waste, with a small fraction of the reactors having higher energy neutron fluxes, that you can burn down the long-lived actinides, the waste material that would mean that you would have to store this stuff for a million years. You can reduce it to hundreds of years. So that potential, so both the advanced nuclear reactors that can do this, and that's why we have to take a fresh look at the nuclear waste repository strategy as well. It's all incorporated in the strategy, which includes research into making fuel cycling, recycling a reality.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. There's been, as Senator Gregg indicated, there have been sort of some subtle signals, maybe just in the sense of lack of attention to the role that nuclear power can play in what we've seen already that have raised concerns. And so I hope that as we move forward and get specifics on the budget proposals, we can have a much more full explanation of the support for this kind of R&D. I'd like to also go to the Yucca Mountain decision. I'm very discouraged by the decision that has been made by the administration with regard to Yucca Mountain. And you indicated in your response to Senator Gregg that one of the things that could be done, and while we were trying to figure out where to go now, is dry cask storage. As you're probably aware, that's not going to help Idaho. Idaho is the location of a significant amount of spent nuclear fuel that was not generated in Idaho. And the federal government has a binding agreement with our state to remove that nuclear fuel by 2035. And it takes a long time. If you're going to shift from Yucca Mountain now, I suspect that just simply putting the material into dry cask storage I know that that's not a solution for the agreement that the federal government has with Idaho, and that we are going to probably look at a very long time frame of whatever the next option you may come up with. is. And so I guess the question I have to you is how will you resolve the issues in terms of managing the spent nuclear fuel at Idaho and the federal government's obligation to take possession of that fuel?
Well, we do have an obligation. My understanding is by 2035 it should be ready to ship out. And I'm hoping after, I don't want to prejudge what this Blue Ribbon panel might determine, but again, let me reiterate that this will be done this year, that we can move in a way that would not take as long as the previous experience.
Well, I hope you're correct about that, and frankly, a lot of the research that's being done at the Idaho National Lab, as you've just indicated, could help be a part of that solution. And although I'm very discouraged in the decision that we've seen, I think we need to get very aggressive at finding a path forward. I've got a couple of other questions. I've got about a minute left. One question I had is, as we were doing pursuing the stimulus package, one of the provisions that was in it was a manufacturing tax credit, which, again, talked about a lot of different forms of energy, but it did not specifically mention nuclear energy. As we revised the bill on the floor of the Senate, we were able to change the language there, not to mention nuclear specifically, but to give the authority to the Department of Energy to include nuclear power in that manufacturing tax credit. I just wanted to make sure you're aware of that, and also to receive your assurances that nuclear power will be able to receive that manufacturing tax credit as we move forward.
I'm not actually aware of the exact details, but I'll certainly look into it. And if it's allowed, they'll certainly be eligible.
All right. Well, thank you very much. One last question. In President Obama's fiscal year 2010 budget request, he assumes 100% auction of allowances under a cap-and-trade legislation proposal that 20% or $150 billion over 10 years is directed to clean energy technologies, including biofuels, renewable energy, and so forth. Can you expand a little bit on what clean energy technologies will receive funding from this proposal and whether nuclear energy will be included there?
Again, I'm not sure of the exact statutes, but let me tell you what I understand it's going to be. The biofuels is an example. Clean energy biofuels is what I call fourth-generation biofuels, of where you're putting far less fossil fuel inputs into the life cycle generation costs. Advanced batteries. We do not have batteries that can last 15 years of deep discharges. That we need probably a factor 2 or 3 higher energy density before I could see a massive deployment of plug-in hybrids, and then even a better battery for all-electric vehicles. Those are examples of clean energy technologies.
Would nuclear be included, in your opinion?
I would have to look again at the statute, quite frankly. Nuclear is, we have still a nuclear waste issue we have to overcome, and we have, but if you look at the palette of our base load electricity now, it's gas, it's coal, it's nuclear.
Well, thank you. I see my time has run out.
You kind of snuck an extra one in on me there. Senator Cardin.